Hello and welcome to the Relax, It's Retirement podcast with your host, Josh Leonard, where we talk about transitioning into retirement with intent. I'm Wendy McConnell. Hey there, Josh.
Hi, Wendy. How are you today?
Oh, I'm just dandy. How are you?
Good to hear. Good to hear. Excited today. Today, we have a special guest on. We have Adam Nash, who's the co founder and CEO of Daffy.org, which is a lightning fast growing company that we just started utilizing as a company and me as an individual. Adam's got a pretty long resume, so I won't read through it all. But he's been the CEO of companies like Wealthfront. He's been involved as an investor in lots of different Silicon Valley startups. He also is an adjunct professor at Stanford, teaching personal finance for engineers. So, he's got to be pretty smart to teach personal finance to engineers, right?
Yes, for sure.
So, welcome, Adam, and thanks for joining us today.
Josh, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So, I guess let's jump right into Daffy. So, for listeners, Daffy is donor advised fund for you, but many people might not know what a donor advised fund is. So let's start out with that.
Yeah, the story of Daffy is an interesting one. It's actually a little bit of a pandemic story. I've had a long career in technology, as you've said. Worked at companies like Apple and eBay and LinkedIn and Wealthfront, and there's been so much innovation in the space in the last 10 to 15 years. I mean, I think we've all learned that there's all these great new apps that help you save and spend better, help you invest better, give you advice. But it struck me that those same technologies, those same features hadn't been applied to giving. And yet giving was so important. It's such a fundamental part of our not even just our financial lives, our family lives. People teach their children. They want to teach their grandchildren how to give. It's part of how they live a life that's not completely selfish, right? It's not
Mhm.
just a financial goal. And yet many people didn't have it laid out as a financial goal. So many people didn't have a concept or even ask the question, how much should I give to charity every year? And so, Alejandro and I had worked together at LinkedIn. We said, well, if they can build these apps for saving and spending, investing, we could do something like that for giving. Used my experience at Wealthfront, and I'd been on the board of a company called Acorns, which now helps
Okay.
millions of people save and invest better, get started, and said we could do this for giving. And then, as you mentioned, it turns out there is this wonderful financial product, this wonderful account type in the US called the Donor Advised Fund. It's been around for almost 100 years.
Hmm.
And yet, most people have never heard of it. If you don't have a high end financial advisor or accountant, you probably haven't heard of a donor advised fund. But we said, what if we took the donor advised fund and took it out of something that only the ultra wealthy used and made it easy enough to use that everyone could use it? Those 60 million Americans every year who give to charity could use this tax free account. And that's really how Daffy was born, right? Daffy, there's a liability a little bit of having an engineer pick names. So Daffy stands for the Donor Advised Fund for you. It's kind of right on the nose, but it's been very exciting. We've been live a little over 2 years, and it's just as you mentioned, the growth has been phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys and how I came across Daffy was uh, we work with the mass affluent, right? We're not working with ultra wealthy individuals, but there are circumstances where they have bigger tax years, they need a tax deduction, and through with the higher standard deduction, et cetera, it's harder to donate to charity and get that tax deduction. So we had initially started using a donor advised fund for one client that had a bunch of stock options come due, a severance package, and sort of their income was 3x what it normally is, right? So we looked at giving ahead for 7 to 10 years. But the limitation, I think, through Fidelity to have an advisor managed account is 250,000, and most of our clients don't have $250,000 to give away to charity. Um, so when I started searching online, Daffy was one of the first ones that came up as a solution with a low to no minimum.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think that some of what you saw at Fidelity or you see at a Schwab or a Vanguard, which are all great
Sure.
organizations and
Yeah.
great institutions, but unfortunately for the donor advised fund, they kind of borrowed the business model from the investment side, right? So they're charging a percentage of assets and actually fairly high fees, right? Like, most of those donor advised funds will charge you 60 basis points, 0.6%, all the way up to $500,000. And as you
Mhm.
pointed out, there's very, very few people who have been fortunate enough to be able to put aside that much money in an account dedicated for charity. And so we saw a lot of opportunity for building a modern product that just charged a simple membership fee. A lot of the nonprofits I've been involved with have that model, right? They charge a membership fee, and maybe there's different tiers for different services, but fundamentally, that one low flat rate we thought would really open up the market. But as you pointed out, the donor advised fund is an amazing product for most people. Certainly, as you pointed out, it's phenomenal for taxes,
Mhm.
right? So it turns out that when you put money into a donor advised fund, what's special about it is you get that charitable deduction right away. And that gives you something that you usually don't have when it comes to giving, which is control over timing, right?
Yep.
So if you, as you pointed out, you have a big year, most Americans now have very volatile income, right? We have good years and not so good years. We have years that we take out money from something and it generates a big tax bill, right?
Mhm.
And then, of course, those rates are highest in those years. And so the ability to time those contributions with the tax hit and then put it in a tax free account where the money's invested and it grows, and then you can give to the organizations and causes you support when you're ready, is really just phenomenal for most people. Although I will tell you that for a lot of our members, they just love having all their giving in one place,
Yeah.
right? They just love having a simple wallet and account and app so that when they go to their children's school or they're giving to alma mater or a cause strikes them or someone asks them for a donation, they can literally just pull their phone out of their pocket, tap, 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 and know that they have that money put aside for charity.
Yeah, I think both on the contributions and the distributions from the donor advised fund, you guys have done a great job of setting up a very intuitive and natural structure that combats a lot of our human tendencies, right? We can set auto contributions, which we know from 401k studies or any retirement savings, right? If we just save what's at the end of the month, there's nothing left at the end of the month, right? So we can set up that auto contribution just like a bill, and we can also set up the donations in the same manner as well. Um,
Yeah, well,
so
this is
I
the
think that was a huge benefit that I saw. You know, if we just wait till the end of the year and try to write a big check, sometimes that's harder to do.
Oh, for sure, and you hit the nail right on the head in some of the basic insight. Like you said earlier, I have a long career in technology and design, and so you never design a product without actually going out to talk to people. And before we wrote one line of code for what became Daffy, we talked to dozens of people across the country about how they thought about giving. It's actually a little bit of a sad story. I was hoping there was one simple answer that I would just talk to a bunch of people and find out that everyone used one or two methods to
Sure.
give, to put money aside for charity. And boy, that was not true. You talk to 20 people, you're lucky if you only get 20 opinions about how much people should give to charity. And that's how I started the conversation. I asked people, how much do you think people should give to charity every year? And I just got a wide range of different, they weren't even comparable. Some people talked in dollars, some people talked in percentages, some people talked about whether you had a good year or a bad year or how fortunate you've been. Um, and so there was no common answer. But what was fascinating to me is that when I talked to those same people and said, well, how much do you believe you should give to charity every year? The good news is that people on average were more generous than they thought everyone else should be. Whatever number they said for everyone else, the number for themselves was actually a little bit higher in most cases, which I thought was a wonderful statement about the natural tendency, the priority people put on giving. But then that third question, I asked them, well, how much did you actually give to charity last year? And almost to a T, there was a pregnant pause there, and people were just a little embarrassed because they didn't hit their own goal.
Yeah.
And it became clear that for most people, it wasn't a question of intent or desire. It was like retirement savings. It was like college savings. People have these goals, but if you don't automate them, if you don't set a goal, we all know that life gets in the way. You have work, you have family, you have social life, there's all these things going on. And the truth is, giving is a hard problem because there's this question of, well, how much can I afford to give? And then who do I give the money to?
Yeah.
And so we really designed Daffy to help solve that problem for people, right? Like when you start from the get go, we ask you to set a giving goal, just a simple financial goal. And as you pointed out, the research, there's actually specific research. Not only is there that original research, which I think you're referring to, that says if you automate a goal, if you set a goal, if you make a commitment, you're more likely to hit it. But it turns out there's follow on research about giving that says the same thing applies, that people who set a goal for their giving, right, a commitment, end up giving 32% more to charity.
Wow. Wow.
And so that's actually what we got excited about at Daffy was like, what if we help people be the generous people they want to be? What if we could mail an app and a service that actually makes it easier to save money on taxes, put money aside, and actually support the organizations you care about? And we got going. And so now we're a few years in.
Yeah, I think for us, as financial advisors, sometimes we run into friction of we know that it's good to give, and hey, this client has a highly appreciated stock, as an easy example, right? That is a great thing to give to charity because if you paid $100 for it, it's now worth $300. You can go ahead and take the $300 tax deduction for that, right? For the current value of it. That is a huge benefit to a client rather than selling the stock and then paying taxes and then writing a check, right? So we want to gift that. One of the things that we found difficult is we talk through a strategy like that for a client and they're like, here's the 10 charities we like to give to every year. And then we're emailing, trying to call all these different charities, trying to find out the appropriate information, and then sending it to the custodian to transfer the shares. And personally, it takes way too much time for me to do that. I think through your platform, you're able to connect with the charity and easily you gift into the donor advised fund, so into the Daffy account, and then you can distribute, those funds out to the charities quite easily.
Yeah, that's right. And I think most people underestimate how many charitable organizations there are in the United States.
Yeah.
Right? It's really getting close. It's well over 1.5 million, almost 2 million organizations across the U.S., and most of them are fairly small. They don't have large technology or financial teams, right? If you build an organization that's going to help feed people, you're focused on helping feeding people. You're not building up a
Sure.
financial back office. You're not building up a technology team. And so, yeah, so donating stock or appreciated assets in general can even be stock, ETFs, mutual funds, even crypto, whatever you've made money on. If you've held it more than a year, when you donate that, you get this double win. You get the charitable deduction for the current value. And by the way, that's off your income taxes, which tend to be the highest rates. And you never pay those capital gain
Mhm.
taxes, which can be phenomenal, especially since a lot of your other investment strategies focus on selling the things with the lowest capital gains and triggering the lowest
Mhm.
taxes. So it's such a beautiful product. But the problem is most organizations can't take stock, they can't take crypto, they can't take mutual funds. And so, yeah, Daffy, a donor advised fund in general, is a wonderful product for that. In fact, one of our first donations was actually from a member who wanted to give a Bitcoin to their congregation in New York. And of course, that congregation couldn't accept it. They didn't know what to do with a Bitcoin. And they had read our press release, like our launch, and said, oh, I get
Oh.
it. I give you the Bitcoin and you get the cash to the organization. And I hate to say it's that simple, but really, for the most part, it is. And this is why, having a donor advised fund that you have access to, that you can contribute assets to when it makes sense, lets people take advantage of that advice that normally is so difficult to, which is to donate stock instead of
Mhm.
donating cash to the organizations you support.
Yeah, I think for my personal account, I had bought some crypto maybe back in 2017. It's kind of going through these cycles over time. It's not something that I pay that much attention to, but a lot of new financial things, when there's a lot of talk about it, I feel like it's my duty as an advisor to sort of explore these things as well. So I've owned this crypto for a while that is pretty high this year. It's gone up in price again. So I thought, oh, great, I can donate crypto into my Daffy account, and I went ahead and sent that over and avoided almost $900 in capital gains. Um, you know, which is cool. Now I can allocate it through one of the models that you guys have. to reduce that risk. So I make sure that that money gets to charity, not only the tax deduction for me.
That's right. And that's actually what gets us excited. I mean, Daffy's mission is a really simple one as an organization. We want to help people be more generous more often. And so you're right. It's not just tax savings. It's actually more money available to the charity to support the organizations you support. And by the
Yeah.
way, when you put money into a donor advised fund, that's all you can use it for,
Yeah.
right? Like the benefits come with a limitation. That limitation is you're going to use that money to support charitable organizations. And what's amazing about that is once you've put the money aside for charity, this weight comes off your shoulders, right? You no longer have to worry about whether you can afford to support an organization or whether you can write that check or make that donation. You have the money. The question
Yeah.
is actually the more important one now, which is who do you want to support? When do you want to support it? And I see a lot of our members get excited about the fact that they can set up recurring donations. You know, most charitable organizations actually don't want the single big donation. What
Mhm.
they'd rather have is consistent support year after year to support their organization and their budget. And so it turns out having an account set aside for charity is a wonderful thing. Just like there are benefits to having accounts set aside for retirement or college savings, charity is that important for most people.
Yeah, I think we've framed it with clients in the past as like a donor advised fund is your retirement charitable account, right? Like we're going to put these funds in there for certain tax advantages while you're transitioning, or if we're relocating assets, we're going to use this as a tax tool, and then you can give over time. And one client in particular has been quite impressed with theirs because they've sort of already earned another year worth of charitable giving just by the growth of the assets, which is really powerful. I mean, they got the tax deduction in 1 year, they didn't have to give it away all at once, and now they got a bonus year to give away money. So
Yeah, you're bringing me back to how I first discovered the donor advised fund. It was actually almost 15 years ago.
okay.
I was at a company called LinkedIn. I was running product. The company went public, and as you can imagine, there was a lot of attention at that time from accountants and advisors who tend to swarm around tech companies when
Yep.
those things happen. But that's exactly the question that was asked to me, which is a simple question of, well, how much do you give to charity every year? Right. And then think about the fact that, well, you have this event, you have this investment that has a lot of capital gains. If you put it into a donor advised fund, not only can you defray the taxes from your other sales, right, of stock or, other gains you have, but you could put away money for 5 to 10 years of your giving or more. And the great news, because it's invested, maybe you get the 11th and 12th for free.
Yeah.
And actually, we see that in our members. We've only been around now for a few years, but we already see, because the market has been generous the last couple of years, we see that our members seem to feel empowered to donate more. And it seems to feel good to them to have that ability, right? To have made that decision. I mean, there's a certain satisfaction that comes from providing. When you save for a goal like retirement, there's some comfort in seeing some success there and some peace of mind. For college, I know for a lot of parents, feeling like that they will be able to tackle that expense gives them some peace of mind. But giving has a similar feature. A lot of people, the organizations, they don't feel good if an organization they care about comes to them and needs their help and they can't provide it this year because other things are going on. So the same emotional logic that makes it better to put money aside for the financial goals that you care about applies to giving as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. For our clients in particular, we focus on folks that are really transitioning into retirement. So, really, 55 to maybe 70. That's when people typically come to us. And I think one of the concerns when we talk about any of these great tax accounts, so an HSA could be another example, or looking at Roth conversions if they don't have proper tax diversification within their accounts, one of the concerns that always comes up is, well, what happens when I die? Right? As we're transitioning into retirement, that's sort of our last life phase.
Mhm.
We're through childhood, adulthood. Now we're going into retirement. We need to prepare our orders. So, what happens to a donor advised fund when a client passes away?
Well, that's up to the donor advised fund, and there really are. There's more than 1,000 organizations that provide them across the U.S. So there are different policies, but for most of the national ones, like Daffy, like Fidelity, like Schwab, like Vanguard, you can leave instructions in the account, right? You can have a beneficiary who will take
Hmm.
over for the account. Remember, the assets are in the name of the donor advised fund, so the beneficiary really isn't getting the assets. There's no taxable event there. It's purely just who can make recommendations on the account. We also have support for the idea of naming an organization to receive the money, right? Or organizations, so that if for some reason when you pass on, if you want to make sure that the remaining funds go to a specific organization, you can set something up like that as well. I mean, at Daffy, we actually embrace the family problem quite a bit. And
Hmm.
so at Daffy, we have a family plan. I know this sounds obvious. Everything has a family plan, right? I'm a father of four. The
Okay.
number of
Yep.
family requests I get for Amazon and Xbox and Apple is really become a new aspect of parenting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But interestingly, when it comes to donor advised funds, very few have them. Right, Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard. They almost set them up like bank accounts. Like you can have a joint account, but that's about it. At Daffy, we set up this idea of a family plan where if you want to add your children or grandchildren, you want to add siblings, parents, grandparents. We actually support up to 24 family members on the account, in addition to your advisory team. And so that helps actually quite a bit in terms of those transitions. And for a lot of our members, especially the older ones, increasingly as you age, there seems to be an increased attention to philanthropy. I don't think it's just financial. I think it's a little bit of values, a little bit of understanding what life's about, and this passion for passing that on to later generations seems to be a big winner with our members when they're using the family plan. The delight they feel when their children or grandchildren talk to them about an organization that they've donated to and ask that wonderful question of why.
Yeah. I think
It's just phenomenal.
we have one client in particular that recently we were talking to, and we were talking about donor advised funds specifically, and QCDs and other tax strategies that they may want to implement at their age. And they said, well, I don't, we could give to this or this charity, but our daughters are very involved in the arts and very involved with different nonprofit organizations there. Maybe we'll just talk to them and see where they would want the money to go. And whenever I was playing around in Daffy and saw, hey, you can invite family members to suggest, like, I'm like, oh, this is perfect. These are real thoughts that people have. Like, well, I know I need to donate money. I'm comfortable donating money, but I don't know really where it should go. So to have family members be able to suggest that is certainly a fantastic feature. I think you also have like sort of a random charity feature as well, don't you? Or geographically based, or both?
Yeah, so our search engine, my co-founder, it's been very interesting. I mean, we were the first donor advised fund actually to launch a fully functional app into the App Store back in 2021. I know it sounds ridiculous. It's 2024, but that's the state of technology in the field. And so when you have a mobile app, actually people engage with it differently. And
Mhm.
one of the things we discovered was that actually people really like discovering new organizations. And so literally a couple weeks after launch, we got these requests. We added a nearby feature. So we color code charities near you. So you just open your phone and you can see by color what organizations are near you. And you probably don't even know. There are food banks near you. There are organizations collecting toys for children. There are organizations working on the environment or working on other causes that you care deeply about. And yes, we do have a fun feature, a little bit inspired by that old Google feature back in the day of I'm feeling lucky of if you just want to spotlight a random organization that's near you, we can do that for you too. But I think this gets back to the fact that giving isn't just a financial task for most people. Most financial tasks are what I think of as kind of single player games, right? They're not things
Mhm.
you share with other people. I mean, in fact, this is one of the advantages that advisors provide is actually having another person you can trust who has expertise you can talk to about financial problems because most people can't talk to their friends or family about financial issues. With giving, though, it turns out people have a social aspect to it. They volunteer together. They're passionate about the organizations they're on the board of or that they've donated to. People like to visit. And so we try to embrace that with Daffy. We try to design that into the product a little bit. But some of this inspiration comes from my family as well. When my grandfather passed away, he left some money. And back then, donor advised funds weren't as well known. He actually started a small foundation. And, my
Mhm.
father and my uncle every year make these decisions in his name about where to give money, which organizations. And so that was a little bit of the inspiration of what we could do with a product like Daffy. And we see that now. We see wonderful things. We see people running campaigns, right? With a donor advised fund on our platform, you can do a matching campaign for a charity you support. We've seen people do this in memoriam for people who've passed away to support organizations that they cared about or that
Mhm.
supported them in their last years. We've seen people raise scholarship funds in the memory of people, to support future students, et cetera. In this case, the person who passed away was a teacher. But fundamentally, we think there's a lot of different ways that you can give. And we try to design those into the product. And so that you don't just have money put aside for charity. You're not just saving money on taxes and being smart financially, but actually we like to help people embrace that side of themselves and share it with the rest of their families.
Well, I think one of the benefits that comes with that is if you're only donating through Daffy, you're sending cash, stocks, crypto, whatever into your Daffy account and then distributing it out. Come tax time, it's quite easy to see how much you contributed to charity rather than, oh, yeah, I gave $20 here and $100 there and trying to aggregate that information together. By having one centralized location, it's very easy to see how much money you gave to charity, even if you're literally just putting it in and sending most of it back out shortly thereafter.
This was one of my big surprises. I told you we did some research in the beginning. People really have a surprising amount of anxiety and stress about finding their donation receipts.
Yeah.
If you're younger, you might have a Gmail search that you do every year to
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
these donation receipts. If you're a little older, I actually print them out. I have them in a folder on my desk so I don't forget them at tax time every year. But one of the magic things about having a donor advised fund like Daffy is you no longer need to do that anymore. It's all in one place. So, like you said, how much did I give to charity? When did I make that contribution? I need my tax receipt. I mean, at Daffy, we don't wait till January 31st to give you your tax receipt. You can get your tax receipt any day of the week, any moment, anytime.
Yeah.
And actually, the surprise win has been a lot of people have this simple question of what did I donate last year to this organization? I know I've donated before. What did I donate? You have it all in one place. You can just look for it. And by the way, if you really are donating the same amount every year, automate it.
Yeah.
Set up a recurring donation. The charity will appreciate it. And by the way, the reduction in stress of knowing that that check will go out, that support will go out, and you don't have to worry about that anymore is phenomenal. So actually, yeah, it turns out there's a lot of other benefits to Daffy
Yeah.
that go well beyond just the smart tax planning piece.
Yeah, I think as the standard deduction here might sunset back to lower levels, through the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the standard deduction went way up, especially for retirees, married filing joint. I mean, it's like a $30,000 hurdle now. So a lot of folks just stop saving those receipts. We've found altogether. So, hey, maybe let's start correcting that habit by tracking it again. So if the tax law does sunset, nothing's renewed. Who knows what Congress will do? We certainly shouldn't debate on that. Um, you already have the record there. So, that creates a nice play out there. I think those benefits are huge. I know we've even just asking clients, as you mentioned, Adam, hey, what do you normally donate? It is a bit of a search party to find out what the answer to that question is. So having that all in one place is definitely a cool benefit. And I think even without the tax deduction, having that general ledger is very helpful for you. With your charitable giving as well. It's really cool that you had stated that, I think it was over 30% people are more generous. They're donating more than 30%. That is pretty amazing to increase by that level.
Yeah, no, it's been wonderful to watch the theory play out. I mean, when you build these products and services, everyone involved has hopes and dreams and theories about how this will make things better. But it's been really wonderful the last few years to see that our initial hypothesis, which is that if we made it easier to give,
Hmm.
if we helped people put money aside when it was convenient for them, right? Not just when someone asks you or emails you or catches you, that it would actually lead to more giving. And
Hmm.
the anecdotal experience that we hear from our members, the overall numbers that we publish for 2023 really have shown that this is true. And like I said, it makes sense. I mean, even you just brought up the standard deduction. What a great example of, there's a lot of people who may not hit the standard deduction, but they're not that far off from it,
Hmm.
right? But giving extra money to charity in one year or doubling up may not make sense to them. They may not have an organization picked out for that money. It takes time. And so that idea that you can be sitting in December and say, wow, I could just put aside a bit more money. Wow, I have this investment that has high capital gains. I'm not so excited about paying those taxes.
Yep.
Why don't I take that stock or that mutual fund or that ETF, put it in a donor advised fund like Daffy, clear that standard deduction hurdle, get that benefit, and now I have time to make the
Yeah.
decision what charity I can get to. That may or may not be the right decision. Everyone's in a different financial situation,
Certainly. Yeah.
but most people don't even have that option available to them. They don't even get to make that choice. And so I love having a product and service out there that kind of empowers people to do what's right for them and who they
I think
support.
I think that's it. It's just another tax mitigation tool. So another big thing that we're always looking at is the IRMA limits. So depending on your income in retirement, you're going to pay more for Medicare. Well, if you're this close to one of those and we can donate a little bit more to charity or get some little deduction that is going to cost you less on a monthly basis for Medicare, that makes sense. But if they're not working, they can't contribute to an IRA, things like that. Our list of options gets shorter, so again, charitable giving can come into play there. Um, Before we wrap up here, Adam, I have a question for you. In our
Okay.
industry, engineers have a reputation. You know, a lot of financial advisors are like, oh, they're too hard to work with, they're too detail oriented. And pretty early on in my career, I had a few clients that were nuclear engineers, and I kind of liked it. It challenged me because everything I said, boy, they were going to check out, double check it, spreadsheet it, and send it to me. So, what in the world are you teaching to engineering students at Stanford? Because I'm assuming they're pretty bright to be at Stanford. So what like takeaways or what was kind of surprising to you teaching students at Stanford?
Oh, I love this question. I had all these jokes ready. I'll let you know. In my industry, actually, it turns out engineers have a reputation too. Um, but we'll put that aside. No, but no, actually, teaching the Stanford class, personal finance for engineers, it's something I'd been doing in my career even before I taught at Stanford. As I rose up my career at companies like I said, like Apple, eBay, LinkedIn, Wealthfront, I found that most people didn't have the personal finance education to make a lot of the financial decisions they were being asked to make. And, it turned out as I rose up as a manager and executive, I had the ability to give these informal seminars about it based on my own education, et cetera. And so built it up over the years. But yeah, at Stanford, you might be surprised, but it's not really surprising if you think about it. It's not about IQ. Personal
Mhm.
finance, financial decisions are not about how smart you are. It's just not taught in most schools, most middle schools, most high schools, most you could have 160 IQ, and to your point, have a PhD in nuclear science, aerospace engineering, an amazingly technical field, and not have ever had someone walk you through the basics of how credit cards work or
Yeah.
mortgages or how to make basic financial decisions or saving for goals, et cetera, or even what the data says about prudent investing. And so that actually turned out to not be a surprise. In the class, you have all these brilliant students, and most of them in my class tend to be people who they're the first in their family in some cases to go to college. Maybe like me, they might be the first engineer in the family. They feel like, to your point, Stanford's a great school, right?
Mhm.
Engineering is a great discipline to study. It certainly pays well when you graduate. They don't want to mess it up. And so
Yeah.
these students are very earnest. That's why they signed up for the class. They want to learn, and it's not taught elsewhere. But probably the biggest surprise for me was how much of an overlap there was with personal finance and my previous work around careers at LinkedIn. Right, I was the head of product at LinkedIn for 4.5 years, immersed in just understanding all the different ways that people navigate jobs and career and income and providing for themselves. And I used to say at LinkedIn that the problem with careers in the US is that when it comes to jobs, mostly what you know is based on, I used to call it the friends of your parents and the parents of your
Yeah.
friends, right? And unfortunately, that's not a great data set. Honestly, that's actually not the body of material that you really want to make such important decisions. And it's true for finance as well, right? If the student has a family member who loves real estate, they might know all this about real estate and know very little
Mhm.
about the stock market. If they have a family member or their family struggled, a bankruptcy, credit cards, etc., that might lead them to be almost phobic about debt, which if you're going to be phobic about something, being phobic about debt isn't the worst thing to be afraid of.
Right, right.
But can lead to irrational and emotional behavior. And so, what's really amazing, every year I get to teach a class, and now thousands of students have gone through the class. The reward is these emails I get from the students where they go off into the world and they have to pay rent for the first time, or they have to
Mhm.
make decisions about, stock options, like you said, or even what job to take or how to think about, their careers. And the notes they come back and the questions, I kind of have an open policy to take these questions from students in perpetuity. But it's amazingly rewarding. I'm hoping I open source the material. I actually publish it online for free. And
Oh,
my
great.
favorite part is when I get emails from teachers or professors from around the country, even around the world, who say, "Is it okay if I use this material for my class?" I mean, I'm like, please. Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
really think this should be taught in every middle school and high school across the country.
It is, and I don't think anyone disagrees with that either. I think that's a common thing we hear is, kids graduate from high school. My mom always used to say to me, they don't even teach you how to balance a checkbook, right? Like your financial knowledge is non-existent when you finish what is deemed as the necessary education in our society. So I think that's a great class to be teaching. I think for us, one of the reasons we started the podcast and do YouTube videos is just get that knowledge out there so that people understand what their options are. The internet is a great place, but sometimes it's filled too much with opinions and maybe TikTok or some social media can often have misleading information as well. So we need to be careful there. Certainly, open sourcing that is a great option to make that available to everyone. Um, Adam, as we wrap up here, do you have any final departing thoughts or anything that you might think is very important for our listeners to know about Daffy, you, or finance in general?
Well, I'm happy to give some advice, but the simplest advice I will say is, if you do give money to charity, right? Everyone's different and makes their own decisions. But if you do regularly give money to a charity, to a religious organization, to a school, an alma mater, a national cause, etc., I would say set a goal for your giving and then put money aside for it. You will be surprised at how much anxiety it frees up and how much more reward there is from feeling like you hit your goal to be the type of generous person you want to be. No one gives for no reason, right? There's a reason there. And so the basics of financial planning, I think, apply there as well. And if I have to put a pencil on it, I will actually say, if you are fortunate enough to have investments that have a low cost basis, stocks, mutual funds, ETFs that you've held for 10, 20, 30 years, and maybe are too much of your portfolio, maybe too concentrated there. Um, it can be a smart tax move and a great thing for charity if, instead of selling those securities and facing that tax bill, you actually put those in a donor advised fund and make that money available. In fact, I'll go as far to say is that you should probably never give cash to a charity if you can help it. You should always donate appreciated assets. And whether you use Daffy or another donor advised fund, it's a wonderful financial product to be using.
Yeah, I think so. It's certainly a cool tool, and I appreciate that you guys have launched a tool that is accessible to more folks. I think that is certainly a big advantage. We will certainly link Daffy in the show notes. If I can find your link, which we'll follow up with to your personal finance class materials, we'll throw those in the show notes as well so folks can access those. Any other great ways to get in contact with you, Adam, or anyone at Daffy?
You can certainly always follow me on social media. I'm always Adam Nash, so I'm fairly easy to find. Daffy.org is the place that you should really go. We have a wonderful set of content. And as you mentioned, Josh, it's so easy to get started. We have no minimum. I think actually, technically, the minimum might be $10 for a contribution, minimum size. We have accounts that are just a few $100s. We now have accounts well over $10 million and everything in between. So wherever your giving is, definitely go to Daffy.org, and we'll definitely give you a link so that your viewers
Yeah.
can get $25 for free to give to the charity of their choice when they open an account.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That'll be great, and hopefully helps them get started setting their goals for charity, and maybe even getting a tax deduction as well. So, thank you so much for joining today, Adam. It was an honor having you on.
No, thank you for having me. It was great.
Yep. So, listeners, feel free to check out Adam's links in the show notes. If you're looking to evaluate if a donor advised fund might be right for you, we'd be happy to help you at the Leonard Advisory Group. You can schedule a 15-minute phone call with us in the show notes as well, or check out our website at leonardadvisorygroup.com, or give us a call at 412-998-PLAN. Thank you.